I'm standing in front of a beautiful heritage home in the downtown of Toronto, just off of Yonge Street here. And this stone is built with beautiful Credit Valley stone, like many buildings in Toronto are. This house has stood for so many generations. So many people have come and gone, families have moved in, families have moved out, and this house has stood until recently, this past winter. We were called to this address because a stone wall had fallen during the night. It was a wall that was built in front of this porch that I'm standing in front of, and there were about 2.5 tons of Credit Valley stone laying on the front yard. What had happened was there were cracks in the stone. When we got here, we noticed excessive cracking throughout. Of course, when owner sees that and thinks, well, it's 150 years old, of course there's going to be cracks. It's just part of it. But it wasn't just part of it. What had happened, there was a problem with an eaves trough. And that eaves trough was cast in water into the shallow foundation of this stone wall. But what took place is you got some water from that downspout into the wall and into the foundation. That water froze and pushed the stone apart just a little bit. But what that meant was now there was a larger gap in there that could accommodate more water. So you get a thaw during the day or while the sun is shining on it. The water, the ice and the snow melts and fills that crack up. It freezes and expands and it opens the crack a little bit more. That happens about 100 times over the course of a winter here in Toronto. Freeze, thaw, freeze, thaw. And every time it freezes, it can push the material a little bit more because the water expands. And then it thaws and it does not go back to where it used to be. It stays pushed out. The cavity's a little larger, the cracks are a little bigger. You can get more water in there, and so the next freeze is even more devastating for the stone because it expands even further to the point where about 2.5 tons of stone fell over in the night suddenly. Column behind me that also has just over 2.5 tons of stone in it also tipped over about 2 inches out of plumb. The stones were cracking. They were trying to tell a story. And unfortunately, the owner took it as just the age of the stone. But what was happening was there was movement taking place that the mortar just couldn't accommodate. And it began cracking, and that is a sign. That's something to look for. There's something more going on in this story. So we were called out to this address because there was some problems with the stonework cracking, and the owner really didn't think anything of it. He just thought it was old stonework. You're going to find cracks in the stonework. What we found was that the foundation had been severely compromised. Again, it was just a few dollars of water diversion, making sure the eaves troughs were sealed, making sure the downspouts were directed correctly. The owner thought, well, maybe a couple of $1,000s to fill some cracks in, but that wasn't the case. 20 some $1,000s later, a new foundation was put under the support column at the front of his house because it was leaning so precariously. And of course, once a couple of tons of stone that's 11 feet high starts to lean over, you know it's not going to stand forever. That weight just seems to grow exponentially. And one day you'll wake up and find it on the ground. When your walls are cracking, they're telling you a story. Now, these houses that we're working on, they have outlasted many lifetimes. They've been here 150, 160 years. There's a church we're working on, 190 years old in Peterborough, Ontario. And these buildings have lasted for so long because the people who built them understood how they stood. They understood how they worked. They understood how they expelled moisture. They understood that although the footings didn't go down to frost levels in many cases, that if you can keep the water diverted, you can keep this building standing for many generations. This particular column, where we had to rebuild the foundation, this took place over the course of one winter. A downspout was redirected. The owner was trying to take care of his property. He paid somebody to direct a downspout, and it was redirected incorrectly. And it flooded the foundation of this column. And over the course of one winter, That column leaned over a full 2 inches. The cracks were massive all throughout the stonework. The walls that were joining to it were twisting with the pressure of the column tipping over. It's a safety issue, but it's also, it's catastrophic. It's a catastrophic failure to a heritage home that really didn't have to take place. Check your downspouts, check your eaves troughs. If there's any discoloration in your walls, any cracking, any movement, look up. Try to figure out where water might be coming in from that would be disturbing those walls and perhaps compromising your foundation. The walls were telling a story, but it wasn't a story that was being heard. These walls talk. Learn to listen at heritagemasonryadvisor.ca.